My name's Jay Sky, and in this video, we're gonna be talking about metalcore bands that fell off. So what is metalcore? I don't know, so this is the end of the video.
Goodbye.
Some of these bands evolved and became household names like Avenge Seven Fold, while other ones just maybe ran out of steam.
That's not what I had in mind.
Or some of them had run-ins with the law and did some time in jail. No, I'm not talking about Ronnie Radke. The bands I'll be covering in this video are As I Lay Dying, Attack, Shadows Fall, and Atreyu. I'll break down what made them find success and what led to them tapering off. I'll also dive into bands that managed to progress to the next level and have a stable career. It's also worth mentioning, over the last year or so, a lot of the bands I'll be talking about have hopped on the rock revival and are currently picking up from where they left off. So here we go. Real metal fans in the early 2000s rejected the genre on sight. They said too focused on the image, too many breakdowns, and they dismissed them with labels like Screamo. Despite that, metalcore was dominating the hard rock and metal scene at festivals such as Ozfest and the Warped Tour. It was safe to say if you made it on Ozfest, you were next up. Much like every genre, it had its time in the limelight and faded into the abyss, and whatever 15-year-olds found interesting the next week was what blew up on MySpace or YouTube. It's the tale's oldest time. Metal bands gatekeep, new genres form, and the youth finds it authentic, and the cycle continues. For me, metalcore was my entry into heavier and screaming music, sometimes called screamo, because blast beats or growls without a chorus and melody just wasn't for me at that point in time. But I love guitar solos, and it was just the right balance to get me hooked. I'd run home from school and run scales listening to Avenge Seven Fold, Trivium, and For My Valentine until my fingers would bleed. Metalcore was a hybrid of so many styles, and that blend felt just right. A bit emo punk, thrash metal with a pop sensibility. The screams felt so raw, like a mosh pit in a Florida skate park, where I had my first battle of the bands. And As I Lay Dying's a perfect example. They were a great band, blowing up right as metalcore was becoming mainstream. New metal was phasing out, and the youth was looking for something raw and authentic to latch onto. Plus, this riff was one that every guitarist had to get their hands on. Ozfest was in full swing, and shows like Headbangers Ball was the perfect platform to connect heavier bands just like this to a new audience in a major way. As I Lay Dying made metalcore respectable to metal fans. They used real melodic death metal riffs with At the Gates and In Flames as influence. They had tight musicianship and didn't lean on synths and gimmicks. They did have one secret weapon, and that was their producer, Adam Duchowitz, the guitarist from Killswitch Engage. This helped them lock into a bigger and more professional sound than the other metalcore bands at the time, as a lot of the competition was blowing up from shitty DIY MySpace recordings. At their peak, they were on Billboard multiple times and even received a Grammy nomination for the best metal performance off the album An Ocean Between Us. They had continued success up until 2012, and compared to most average metalcore bands, they stayed strong. They didn't switch up, sell out. Their sound musically stayed consistent. So with all that, what happened? Well, their vocalist Tim Lambesis became obsessed with the gym. In years leading up to 2013, fans even noticed a shift in the As I Lay Dying frontman. He was focused on bodybuilding, and this led to an unhealthy obsession with the gym as he began isolating himself from bands and other relationships in his life. He was clearly taking steroids, which not only changes your physical form, but your brain chemistry, leading to paranoia, rage, and aggression. Tim approached someone at his gym in Oceanside, California, who he believed was a hitman. That person was in fact an undercover cop, and it got as far as $1,000 down payment. This wasn't vague emotional venting. He gave specific details such as her address, place of work, and when she'd be alone. This was enough evidence that he was arrested on the spot for solicitation of unaliving. The band immediately broke up, tours were canceled, label relationships ended, and the story hit mainstream news within hours. And overnight, they went from a respected metalcore, Grammy-nominated metal band, and the next day, it was over. Years have passed, and after Tim served his time in California State Prison, the band is regrouped. Some band members have left over trust issues, the rest you could find touring in 2026 all over Europe. They for sure have tarnished the great band that they once built, and they will never be quite as prestigious or successful as they could have been. Who remembers Attack? They came up during the absolute peak of MySpace bands, scene culture, and Warped Tour discovery. Their 2008 debut, Someday, came suddenly, blew up online before traditional metal media even mattered. At the time, you didn't need radio, you didn't need Billboard, you needed virality amongst teens. They blended synth and breakdowns and heavy use of auto-tune, simply mosh-ready songwriting that was perfect for this young and charismatic audience that they cater to, with songs like Stick Sickly and Smokahontas. They lean hard into neon merch, crabcore stances, scene hair, and fashion similar to bands like Cobra Starfish. The perfect combo to be meme-ready and hated by traditional metal fans. Perfect example, my death metal head roommate Dave in college just hated these guys. Like every time someone was over the apartment or maybe even just hang out in my room, he would snag them, bring them into his room, pull up YouTube and show them the Attack Attack crabcore video. And this is the ironic part, that metalheads were constantly promoting these guys because they were so silly, they sucked, they were so whack, and meanwhile they were kind of suppressing these underground like Black Dahlia murder bands and helping put on these metalcore bands with autotune. And right as the trend of neon crabcore was coming to a close, they did what many bands have failed to do. They called it a quits, and 3 of their core members went on to form new projects that were actually successful and taken more serious. Austin Carlisle of Mice and Men, up until he had to leave the group because of health issues, Shomo of Beartooth, and Johnny Frank of Bill Murray. It's crazy the talent and level of success that made up Attack Attack. So what happened to the band? They knew when to cash their chips and get out before the meme monster of a band they created died before their eyes. This is a great takeaway for bands because it's much less likely that a fan will accept an artist who's changing their sound or image. It's better to start something brand new from scratch, and that's what the guys in this group did. And since these guys had the talent, resources, and experience, they did just that. And then there was Atreyu, another band that did all the right things. They locked into the metalcore formula early enough to ride the wave alongside bands such as Avenge Seven Fold, For My Valentine, and Bring Me the Horizon. Although I was a fan of theirs, I do think they lack a bit of that magic that some of these other bands had. The songs were good, but not great. The singer's voice was decent, but not memorable. They checked all the boxes of a great band, but simply didn't have that extra 20% they needed to hit that next level. And let's be honest, how many Metallicas and Avenged Sevenfolds are there in a generation? Not that many. And like many of these other bands I'm mentioning who shifted their sound as the times changed, it's very hard to appease your existing fan base while exploding into the mainstream and conquering a new and bigger audience. Even Metallica struggled to do this in the 90s, but luckily the Black Album was excellent enough that they could afford to lose some fans. Then there was Saint Anger. Same with one of my favorite bands, Trivium. They never hit that Avenged Sevenfold level, but managed to shift their sound as the times changed. One thing they did do that set them apart is that they're a guitarist band, similar to Dream Theater and Intervals, and bands like that. This type of niche and passion has always stood out to me, and I remember Matt Heafy talking about using John Petrucci's Rock Discipline DVD as a warm-up before shows back when I was 15. Oh, and I discovered these guys in 2005 watching the Ozfest 2005 DVD. They were doing dual solos on the song
This is a gunshot to the head of trepidation.
It's iconic moments like this that make the difference. And because they were soloing like Iron Maiden and bands like Atreyu were just not. It's not as exciting and special, and the memory of Trivium at Ozfest is forever baked into my mind. I don't know how old many of you who are watching the video are, but in the 2000s, I would buy as many Guitar World magazines as I could afford. And 2 of the guitarists that were often featured in playthrough articles and frequently on the cover were the guitarists of Shadows Fall. They were more of an old school metalcore band who originally started as a death metal band. As time went on, they bridged elements of thrash and metalcore together. Their singer had the longest dreads I've ever seen, and the guitar solos were not that hard, but very dope, which was great as a metal teenager because you could actually get them under your fingertips, and they were great for excerpts in guitar magazines. One thing that all big bands have in common is a catchy guitar riff that isn't too hard for new players to learn. Free promotion at a Sam Ash near you. Rest in peace. Even Led Zeppelin got this one right.
No stairway. Denied.
Nailed it. They were also early to the metalcore scene with heavier roots such as bands like All That Remains, Unearth, and Killswitch Engage. These bands were different than the tween Attacks of the world with more street cred in the metal community. But as many of their fellow metalcore bands had crossover hits like Avenged Sevenfold's Backcountry and For My Valentine's Tears Don't Fall, Shadows Fall just stayed in their lane. In other time periods, classic metal roots held more weight for longevity. For example, Anthrax and Slayer. But with hard rock and metal's window slowly fading, only the best evolving bands managed to stay the course. The scene was quickly turning more emo, pop punk, and hip hop. Headbangers Ball ended in 2007, and MTV was switching to mainly reality TV. The landscape for music discovery was weighing heavily on YouTube and MySpace. For those bands who depended heavily on TV to grow their audience, the window of opportunity was closing. So without a cute frontman singing "Seize the Day," it would be tough to get that one metal band crossover spot in MTV or VH1. Without a dedicated metal countdown show. And by the way, I have a metalcore countdown show. And let me know in the comments if you guys would be interested in seeing more of those. So metalcore is one of my favorite genres. So many great bands and memories from that time period. The energy, the breakdowns, and the bad haircuts. The sad truth is that in order for there to be top bands, you need to have small local and mid-tier bands as well. Not everyone has what it takes to be the biggest rock band in the world, with an ever-evolving career like Bring Me the Horizon. It's a combination of timing, talent, and luck. And when I was 15, I discovered all these bands watching Headbangers Ball. I remember seeing Backcountry for the first time and flipping out. Hand of God by For My Valentine. And videos for every band I mentioned in this video. Metal wasn't for everyone, and as a kid who grew up listening to Limp Bizkit and Blink-182, straight death metal wasn't easily digestible for me, but metalcore was my ticket and introduction into heavier music. I could talk about this all day, and I may make additional videos about more bands if you guys dig the video. All these bands are successful and have influenced myself and thousands of others, so in no way am I putting them down by saying that they fell off. That's simply life, and many of these bands are touring in the current rock revival we're having. My name's Jay Sky. I appreciate everyone for tuning into the video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support really helps this channel grow. Follow me on Instagram, and until next time, peace.